believe if you are okay to take new information in, make connections, connect with it with the business, connect it with the technology, and understand what should actually be a product be like. That is when you should be able to maybe understand the UXs. So are you okay being ambiguous, and are you okay being the person who makes sense out of ambiguity? I think that is when you should be understanding that you are okay for a UX video.
Hey everybody, welcome to UX Gorilla's Master Series. Our goal with this show is to help you gain new perspectives, tools, strategies and mindset for a successful career as a user experience designer. We are inviting some of the smartest experts from different industries around the world and learn about the path they took, the challenges they faced and learnings they had to help you accelerate your own journey. Our guest today is Preeti Sheokand, who is the co-founder of Design Shift, a UX training institute in Bangalore that provides online and offline training. What makes her story interesting is the fact that Preeti was the Spire Fellow at Department of Atomic Energy and completed her Masters in Organic Chemistry before moving into human-centered design. Not completely fulfilled by her career in organic chemistry, Preeti realized maybe she would do best in something that involves deeper understanding of human nature. That is when she stumbled upon UX as a career and saw it as a perfect intersection of technology, behavioral science and psychology. That is when she shifted gears and took admission in the master's program in human-centered design at Srishti School of Design. Once accepted in the program, Preeti consulted multiple startups to put her knowledge to test and give herself industry exposure even before graduating from the college. At Srishti, Preeti deliberately chose to study user experience beyond just screens. She explored voice interfaces and chatbots at times when they were not so popular. She then went ahead and worked with a VC firm where she was responsible to design and facilitate human-centered design for AI-focused startups. It was around this time that Preeti and her husband Sudhir, also a UX professional, saw a huge skill gap in the aspiring designers. Deeply moved by their desire to help these aspirants, they traded their weekends to teach students. They taught their first batch for free from their own home, and now, almost a year later, they are formally known as Design Shift. Today, Design Shift has a lot of success stories to share, not only from India, but from around the world. If you ever get a chance to talk to her, you will see how much passionate she is about the work she is doing, and her energy is very contagious. Preeti is always open to possibilities and collaboration, and the rapid pace at which Design Shift has grown in the last 11 months is a true testimony to her passion for the cause she is working. She is here with us today. Let's welcome her. Hi Preeti, how are you doing today?
Thank you so much for such an amazing introduction. Thank you so much. I'm happy to be here.
Awesome. So, Preeti, let's start from the very beginning. You had a very, I assume you were a very academically bright student by the conventional terms, given that you were one of the Inspire Fellows, right? And and then you moved on and went into UX. So, how did that happen for you?
Well, yes. To start with, yes, I was academically bright student. I did well throughout my education, whether it was my 10th class, 12th class, or it was my post graduation. I had always been interested in human psychology. To begin with, I always had a desire to maybe at some point go back to this. At a certain level in my career, I didn't really know about UX till a very late stage in my career.
Right.
I moved to Bangalore for an internship opportunity, with Shell, which was a hardcore chemistry background, and Bangalore introduced me to UX. And
Wow.
so I was continuously trying to see whether I should go for cognitive psychology as a field or maybe behavioral psychology as a field. And so, but again, they were very hardcore basic sciences, and I decided I don't want to do another very basic science field. So I decided to go for UX.
Wow.
So Srishti was very close to where I was. Actually, I joined my PhD in material chemistry, which I
Oh,
left
wow.
because I was not really okay with being in a field which was too dissociated. So I feel science is not that of a human centric field, or it is not associated with people that much. So I decided to not continue with science, and actually I went ahead and did my master's
Wow.
from. So that's how it happened.
Awesome. So while you were in Srishti, you wrote a thesis which was quite interesting. Could you explain about what was the topic that you chose for your thesis and what did you work on basically?
In Srishti, we do a capstone project towards the end of our masters, and I did my master thesis project with Siemens. I focused on using multimodal interactions. My main area in the multimodal interaction was actually voice. So I basically focused on how do you use multimodal interactions to provide, autonomy, competence, and relatedness to people working in complex systems. So people working in industrial scenarios like power plant, or who are working in very high pressure jobs like who are in medical professionals. So
Right.
how can we use these different kind of interactions to actually better the experiences, not in the traditional terms of just a wow experience, giving them just a task based or finishing a task kind of experience, or even the UI experience, but how can actually this enable them to have a better life and more purposeful life. So that was the thesis project I worked on.
Wow. You come from a very hardcore data and that sort of a science background. So how did you took that transition? You mentioned something about working in the with the doctors, right, with the caregivers. So did you talk to them? So how did you cultivate those skills?
Well, I was always a talking person. I never minded talking to people. I enjoyed even when I was in my master's, chemistry master's, I'll maybe find somebody very interesting on a railway station. I'll go talk to them. While teaching, so I don't. I have always been a very open person. I can go and talk to anybody. So that has always been okay with me. So it really did not. It was not really so much of a transition for me, but I feel that was one of the reason I could choose a field like this.
Oh wow.
So
I meet a lot of aspiring designers, and they are right now in that dilemma whether they should make a career in UX and what would be their life like if they do UX. Now these people could be developers currently. They could actually be like just like you. They could be the science graduate, or they could have done engineering, or they could be UI designers or graphic designers now transitioning into UX. So, what should that process of assessing whether or not UX is a career for them should look like? Like, what are the questions that one should ask themselves to make sure that they are taking the right action?
okay, well, everybody first needs to understand the UI and the UX are like totally different ball game. So if you're talking about actual UX career, it probably you will not be really focused on how the screen is or how the product is coming out, but you're actually building the product itself. You are actually defining what the product should be. So if somebody wants to assess these parameters, I think you need to be able to have a lot of data. When I say knowledge,
Right.
some bank for video. So you should be okay reading about policy one day, and then reading about radiologist the other day, and maybe reading about nuclear power plant the very next day. So I believe if you are okay to take new information in, make connections, connect with it with the business, connect it with the technology, and understand what should actually be a product be like. That is when you should be able to maybe understand the UXs. So when we are talking about this, we get a lot of students in design shift and who come with the perception that the idea is that you'll get some really nice looking screens, the UI is great, and that's the whole UX field. And so they get very very grilled for the 1.5 months when they come in, and they don't have even a laptop with them, and they realize, oh god, what we didn't know where there is user research, where there was research synthesis. So if you're UX as a feel it and you want to judge it, are you okay being ambiguous? And are you okay being the person who makes sense out of ambiguity? I think that is when you should be understanding whether you are okay for a UX field or not.
I think you gave some really awesome insights on, what an actual day of a UX person looks like. So it's not obviously just about the aesthetics and the drawing part in it, because there are many. I think, like, for me personally also, the first reasons that I started thinking about design was because I was always interested in arts. So that was the starting point, but soon enough I also realized that it has to be very industry specific. So whatever you are designing, you have to understand the industry, you have to understand the business, you have to be very, very open with exploring the data, right? So it makes absolute sense what you're saying. So you talked about something on the lines of research, and of course, you told me about you spoke something about the research synthesis and things like that. So how much research do you think is good enough to start with? This is especially because in many design teams there's just one designer and that person is doing pretty much every job. So what should be how much research should they focus on to not just get swayed away by the research, but actually get to the implementation as well?
Well, a very very good question. So research is like you cannot ever put an end to research. I come from a very research-centric field. I come from a academia where we would do probably literature survey for 2 years, and I know that there are companies who are very heavily banking on research. But again, here we are focused on building a product, so we can't go on doing research for endless amount of time. So again, how much research is enough? Well, I don't think there is a number I can put or anybody else can also put. But if a researcher at at a certain level, or the designer at a certain level has understood that they have in-depth understanding of what the problem is, they can at least move towards some sort of concept validation. That is when they should at least try exploring. And I believe once you actually have start some sort of concepts, this is still in the research phase, and research phase is not just talking to the user in the initial phases, but you have made a product, you have figured out the usability testing, then you're still doing the iteration. So I don't really know when you actually say that, okay, this is enough. But I guess you need to have in-depth understanding of what the domain is, what the technology is, what the market is, and what the business is. And with that, if you are able to set some sort of goals for your users, if you're able to figure out what are the major pain points and how you can target them, at least that's a start. So that's, I guess, rather than saying when to end it, I can say, well, this is when you have started enough, and then you can always come back to it.
Right. Like, it could be an iterative thing where you just make something, you go out, test it, then again, use some bit of a research to improve it. So makes sense. Absolutely. So you have a lot of experience working with startups, first as a consultant, and then you joined a VC firm where you now consult startups, right? And for many startups, they understand the value of good UI, but not necessarily the UX. Like, that might not be on the top of their priority list. How do you help them see the ROI that they should invest into this? Yeah.
Well, okay, to be honest, throughout the time when I've consulted with different startups, there have been the good days and there have been not so good days too. So some of the startups which actually came and actually were looking at a solution, when the research was put in front of them, they were really, really, they took it very positively. They in fact gave me more time to go back and do research. Then it is not that I didn't have the startups where even when I was trying to teach them the value of UX, they were not okay with it. So I guess it's a two-way street, to be honest. I believe that as UX researchers or as the UX designers, it's important that at every step we try to make sure that we are showing them the pictures. I believe that if you just continuously tell them and give them an idea of, okay, this is who your competitor is, this is how they have done well, based on this, let's go and try and talk to the actual users who are using the current products, or who are probably you are going to be targeting, and what is it that they are facing the problem with the current projects, the current products. Maybe they will understand, but again, it's a 50-50 game. A lot of them don't.
Right. So maybe starting from actually scanning them, doing the horizontal scanning and actually seeing what's all there in the market, and then probably from there on, like you have got there first, go ahead, and then from there on you plan the other studies, because obviously now when you start involving users, sometimes it involves incentivizing, sometimes it involves other things as well. So this is like the low stake, low risk sort of a research that you can get started with.
A lot of time, I believe people in the startup world don't see designers as somebody who can actually help them define a product or give a direction to the product. They will come to designers at the time when they want to make the product look nice. So if we go with enough ammunition, which is what I call a secondary research of the market, business, and technology, they would accept you because they know that you know enough and you know what they know what you're talking about and you know what they're doing. So I believe if you go with enough ammunition, if you have done your own research and you go and present it to them at that stage, they would be more receptive. So I work in AI as a field, and I believe I learned a lot of technology very, very fast in the time when I was working. I learned about what is NLP, what is NLU, what are the different type of intents, identity. So nothing which was taught to us as UX designers. But I believe it gives me a ground to talk to them. So I at least need to understand their language. Whether I'm talking to a business guy, so I need to understand the business language. So it's a user research not only when I'm talking to the users of the product, but actually user research when I'm talking to my clients too. So I need to do user research for a business guy also, for a technology guy also.
That makes absolute sense. I mean, this is one skill which is not very talked about, and I really appreciate you bringing that very interesting phrase you mentioned, enough ammunition. That's a very amazing analogy actually to think of it like that. But of course, you'll receive support if you understand the industry well and if you understand the stakeholders well, as you are supposed to understand your users. Absolutely. So, Preeti, just like you, I'm also from a design school, and looking back, there are a lot of things that I appreciate that my college education gave me. But sometimes there are times when I wonder if it helped me necessarily in UX, because it didn't. Like they didn't teach me UX per se. So, what do you think about, like, do you think if degree had helped you in a certain sense, or do you think you would have probably at that time taken up an internship or found a mentor that would have been better? Not in the sense of regretting it, but many times I meet many students who are right now trying to make a decision that whether we should opt in for a 2 year of master's course or should we go for an internship. So
well, I'm going to be walking on a very thin line here. But to be honest, if I had not done the projects I did, if I had not consulted during my degree itself, I think I would have been lost. And this, I think the academy and the industry are too dissociated. They are showing one picture of everything to the students. And to be honest, I come also from a chemistry background. So I can definitely tell you that this is not a scenario only for design. The situation is same whenever you talk about even the chemistry as a field, and I am assuming for a lot of other fields too. Other than a few handful colleges which are probably doing a very good job at industry and academic, collaboration, most of the students are clueless. Okay, so to those of who are trying to start your career, well, I believe if I would have started off as I would have done an internship, I would have been better off. But a lot of time for me, at least, it has been a lot of how do you go from science to UX. So maybe in that sense, my degree did help. So they understand that you have a master's degree now. But I believe when you are trying to go for a degree, you can also start looking at the internship at that time. Go and talk to mentors, because don't go blindfolded. I know a lot of my batchmates were clueless even after the degree. They didn't really because they didn't really have anybody who was in the industry and they were talking to. So throughout the degree also they were clueless. So I believe go talk to people. Grab them by their throat. If they don't respond, you call them again, you pin them again. Don't stop until you get somebody's audience. I believe if you're so keen about pick freelance projects. There are enough number of freelance projects out in the market. Try getting your hands dirty before you realize that, okay, I'm committing myself to a 2 years project, a 2 years course, and I don't I don't know now after entering the course, okay, what's going to go on with me. So you have LinkedIn, you have a lot of opportunities where you can reach out to people. I believe do both the things at the side. And if you feel after you come to a mentor that you don't need to do a master's degree, you can do a short course and see, are you able to make a career? Are you able to get it through the direction? And maybe if you still want to go into, really in depth, maybe at that time you can run a course. That's how I would suggest that.
This is I think this is everything that would help anyone to make a decision. So in the end, I think what matters is that you are making an informed decision. So there should be a good why to your what. You should know why you're doing this. So even for me, as you mentioned that many of our batchmates were clueless, for the first semester even I did not know what I was doing, because I was an engineering student and suddenly we are learning about so many things, and there are exercises which want you to do certain things and you don't know the reasons for it, and you don't have an industry mentor, so it was really difficult. I actually got a lot of mentorship from my friends who happened to be in engineering, and they actually made me see the other side of design, and I don't know what I would have done if I did not have those sort of friends. So absolutely, I think also now education is not just limited to these institutions. So yeah, I mean, so many short courses coming up. So coming to that, how did design shift happen for you?
Was last year, around this time is when we started. So they used to interview a lot of people, and people would come in, and again, a lot of people want to start the career, but they don't know how to do it. A lot of other people, even in my own circle, were trying to start. And we realized that, again, there are a lot of institutes who are trying to take off on it and trying to teach, again, not the right stuff. So it's very easy for somebody to now these days call themselves as UX UI designer, but they don't really understand the depth of the field. So we realized, well, we know something. Why don't we go ahead and do something about it? And we just rolled an inquiry that we'll teach some students for free.
Wow.
We thought that we could accommodate 8 people in our house. We'll do 8 people. So we floated inquiry. We got quite a good response, and we started the first batch. Were not really thinking of doing a second batch, but we got calls from people, and they were like, okay. So we decided we'll do a second batch. Then we decided we'll do a third batch. Then after some time we realized, okay, we can't accommodate that many people in house. So we had to formalize it. So basically, on and off, we started thinking that we'll help out in certain way, in whatever way possible. It just kept going. We had very good word of mouth from our students. We, try to put our heart out to the course. We try to teach them whatever we could. It did okay. We have helped a lot of students. We have had good number of people actually starting up their career in UI UX. So it just worked out on its own. I guess we just wanted to help out, and it became Design Shift. So that's it.
This is amazing. So at Design Shift, what is it that you're doing differently? Like, what are the skills, or what is the curriculum that you're focused on at Design Shift?
Okay, so when we started, the first idea was we are not going to bring in a few students, make some pretty looking portfolio for them and tell them, like, go ahead, you are a UI UX designer now.
Right.
So that's what we decided we don't want to do. So we decided that we are going to do a very, very process-oriented course. It should actually follow the industry process. So what we do differently is, when the students come in, they do 2 kind of projects. One is which is a heuristics and redesign of current application, and the second one is when they take up a project from scratch up. They take a problem statement, which is one-liners problem statement, and they actually make a product. They do this user research, they do research synthesis, they do secondary research and domain research. They come up with what are the major pain points which they want to target in this product. They figure out what are the task flows, user journey, information architecture. They do different type of concepts, and maybe at some time when they have the time, they go back and do a quick concept validation. Then they decide which is the concept they want to pick up. They make the flows for those low fidelity, paper wireframes. Then they do high fidelity prototypes, and then they go ahead and do the visual design. In the heuristics also, they understand that when they're trying to focus about the redesigning of an application, it's not just, oh, I don't like this color or this application is not fancy enough and I will just redesign it. They actually focus on the usability challenges which are there in the application. We make them follow NN heuristics. We actually make sure that everything they're pointing out actually has a basis. So what we try to do differently is bring logic to design. At least that's, I guess, in one line. We want them to do everything, whatever they're doing, with a logic, with a reason, and focus on, again, not just a design aspect. We don't let them pick projects because, hey, I want to make a pet application, I'll make it. Bring me a business case. Can you tell me why would somebody use your application? Can you tell me, I want to make a music application. Why do you want to pick up that specific area?
Right.
Go figure out what are the business models. Why are you doing something differently? So we question them, we let them question us, and so I guess we try to hope. We are hoping that we add some logic to whatever design they're doing.
That's amazing. So, is it a group-based thing? Like, do they work in groups or do they do individual work? How does it look like? How does the classroom look like typically?
So we try to do both. So we try to encourage that the first heuristics project they do they do it in a group, and the second project, which is an individual project, is what they do independently. Now, why we want to do both is because when you go out in industry, there is a very good chance to actually work in a team. So they need to understand how to coordinate with different designers also. So what if somebody gives them something in a file, and how do you take it up? How do you document something given by somebody in a very raw format? The second project is an individual project. That's starting from problem statement to visual design. Now that is because we believe that, again, a lot of startups want to hire one designer who will do everything. So now these people actually need to understand how to do everything, whether it is user research or it is actually visual design. So that's the reason we want the second project to be an individual project.
Right. So this is quite interesting. Again, we came to the point where you said that there are places where designers are supposed to work alone, and there are places where designers are supposed to work in a team. Many aspiring designers come and they ask that we have three opportunities. Either I can work as a freelancer, or I can work as a designer in a startup, or I can work with a big company, or sometimes even an agency. So do you think when somebody is just starting out, what should be their approach like to assess? There's one thing that the companies or the organization assess the students, but I think it's equally important as somebody who's starting their career to assess what way they want to go, even in terms of the organization that they want to work with. So what do you think should be a good way to assess that sort of opportunity?
Well, I guess again it depends on the person. When I was joining in, I kind of had all the three options that you're talking about. So I wanted to take the toughest pass first. So it's like eat the frog in the morning. So the toughest task is I wanted to start the most challenging, career job in first as when I was starting as my first. I'm the only designer here right now. The company is trying to hire a few more designers, but I felt that I could do it. I had done it for a lot of other projects.
Right.
So I felt that I made a great decision. Obviously, you realize that sometimes, okay, you are alone. What if you could talk to some other people?
Right.
But I think it depends on the person who is looking for this. If they feel that they have enough confidence, they can take the pressure of the business, the technology, and the design. They can definitely go ahead and do in a place where they're only working themselves. If they feel that they would rather have somebody guiding them, they would have some sort of help, they should go for the other opportunity. I believe in a career, you should taste all of them at a certain level. You should be able to, in what order do you do that would depend on a person probably.
Right.
So if you're up for it, I will say go for the hardest. Whichever one you find is the hardest.
Awesome. Yeah. So you told something about the heuristics, right? So are you talking about the Nielsen's heuristics?
Yeah, so I'm talking about Indian heuristics. Yeah,
Okay. So there might be few people who might not know it, and it might be really helpful for them. So can you explain like why is it a good form of doing audit, like quick and dirty, and how they can use it?
Okay. Well, this is how I start in my class also, and I take the heuristics class. So when you actually are criticizing or when you are critiquing a application, and you go ahead and say, "Hey, I don't like this," and the person who's going to be sitting in front of you, who is probably the whole business team, and they're like, it doesn't matter. So when you are critiquing something, you need to have certain, well-established academic basis on where you are actually deciding whether the application is right or not. So the NL principles are focused on, deciding usability of an application rather than the appeal again, whether actually the product is functioning or not.
Right.
I believe that's a very obviously you can have a lot more inputs on your own. You can actually talk to a couple of users and bring a lot of input from that side also. But I guess this is a very quick way of realizing, are you doing something major blunder in your application?
Right.
There are all these smaller things which you will figure out that there are still there. But again, instead of focusing on doing a very massive, research and figuring out, which will cost a lot of time and money, this is a very easy way for you to go ahead and do a quick understanding of where we are standing, and maybe then make that call. So uh, so how do you do it? Well, find some UX experts who understand what is heuristics in itself. Talk to a few of them and figure out, give them some task and let them use the application and get their feedback. If you yourself are a UX expert, you can definitely use your own input and those standards to see if the application is performing correctly or not. So
Absolutely. I've been doing NN audits and usability testing for some time, but the very first course that I launched online was on NN heuristics. And I think anybody who says that we don't have money to do, usability testing, or we don't have enough resources, that is bullshitting. Actually, this is one thing that anybody could do. It is so easy, and there are so many resources. They just have to look it up. Like if you don't know it now, you can practice it. Basically, it's those 10 set of those 10 set of parameters, and you can even create your own heuristics, but you have to be obviously open enough to it. So I really appreciate that you're actually giving students the tools that they can start from applying from the day one, because it is actually the most essential and the easiest way to get started into UX. So Preeti, what are the skills that you think in current times, what are the things that any designer who wants to make a successful career in UX must master? Now, they might be the hard skills, which are like obviously knowing prototyping and all those things, but also the other skills that they should know.
sure. And I'll rather say that the hard skills are easy to get. You can always go ahead and learn how to use Xara, how to use Sketch, and how to use
Right.
InVision. I don't believe tools are going to take you there. It's good. It's a good addition to what you're doing. I believe read. I guess that would be a common question. Read a lot about a lot of stuff. Be open-minded. Don't, even if you are a designer, and yes, we say we are pretty open-minded. Be open-minded about technology. Be open-minded
Right.
about business. Be acceptive, because in the end, this is where you're going to work for. You're going to work for a business. You're going to work with the technology. So just talking about users, yes, great, that is your job. But I guess other than that, if you really want to succeed, you need to understand business. You need to understand market. You need to understand technology. If you really want to become a great designer, that is what is going to take you there. And I guess everything else is hygiene. You need to know your UX research. You need to know your tools. You need to know all of that. So that's like a given.
Absolutely. So let's say there is somebody who is like listening to us now, and they know that they want to make a career in UX, but they don't have maybe enough finances or enough resources to get started, but but they really want to do a UX job. So what would you say that their first step should be? Like, what should they do now to at least get started on their journey?
Well, first read about what is UX. There are so many resources available. You can go to Medium, you can go to interactiondesign.org, you can call me. You can call somebody else who is working in the field.
Right.
You can first understand what the field is, understand what it wants from you, and what can you give it to the field itself. Make a choice that is it the right kind of bang for you. And believe me, it took me a lot of time to realize what is the field for me. I did a lot of stuff, and before I realized what is going to work. So it's not just you who are confused. Everybody is trying to make a call at certain time. So I looked at UX from a psychology perspective. I always looked at how people make decisions. I always looked at why a green button is green and mine is a red button is red. Why is something not active? Why is something active? So figure out what makes you, first figure out what is UX. Then figure out what about UX is what you makes you want to do it. Then talk to some people who are in the industry and read. I guess that's the only solution. You read as much as you can about the field, and then try to pick up maybe some freelance project and start building a portfolio to join the field.
Definitely. So this is interesting because you talked a lot about first understanding what UX is, and I assume you have taken a lot of time to come to that sort of understanding and you've come to appreciate it. So I would like to know from you, like, how do you define UX? What do you think UX is?
A lot of definitions about UX here, but to me personally, it's about making, okay, any user is using any kind of product and you are able to deliver the right kind of experiences. I'm trying to be very broad here again.
Right.
Whether you whether you're talking about a B2C client where the experience is about every time they do a task they're wowed, whether you're talking about a radiologist who has to do 10 x-rays every day and her health is getting impacted and you're making sure that she is able to do the same task much more efficiently, taking care of her own health, or whether it is about my mother messaging me, forwarding me a message on WhatsApp. I guess, if can you make all these tasks enjoyable, achievable, and friendly to all these users. So why I bring this is I work in a B2B scenario. So the way B2B works is much different than how B2C works. And a lot of time people think that, making the wow experience or making the user very amazed by the product is usability, but not really. You are actually talking about, high data scenarios where you have so much information and user has to process in the app. The focus is about how can they do it efficiently in the least amount of time, and how can they still be sure about the kind of work they're doing. You talk about AI, how do you build trust? So you talk about AI. A lot of time when we are talking about AI products, we want to tell the user that okay, what AI has given you a suggestion and this is a correct one, but how do you make sure that you're not giving them too much confidence but too less confidence also? So how do you balance that and still able to make sure that people are actually using products which are like AI? So a lot of time people will it has happened with me. Anytime I talk to people about AI products, either people are too defensive about it and think that AI is going to take away all their jobs, or people think, AI should solve cancer in a day. So how are you able to balance something like that? So I think user experience is much more than it, number of clicks, number of likes, or number of downloads or reviews. I think it's about providing the right kind of experience to the right type of users for all kind of valid products, whether it's physical, digital, or even voice-based experiences. So no UI there, you still have to take care of that.
Wow, amazing. So, if you have to pick, what do you think? If you have to, pick some products which you think are doing a great job at providing good UX, what are the products that you would choose?
Well, I think again, Alexa is obviously very new in the market. I think it's doing a pretty decent job.
Wow.
And believe me, it's very hard to work on conversation UX. People expect a lot from it, but I also know the technology angle. I think, it's not that easy to do. I think Alexa is really amazing. I think Uber is probably going to be a common one. A lot of people do like Uber.
If, let's say, somebody has to get started with knowing more about UX, so what would be your pick of blogs or books or any other resources that they should get started with?
I I really respect interactiondesign.org for that. I believe they have amazing content. I think to those of you who can read, I think please go ahead and do interaction design. I know a lot of my students who come back and say, "Hey, we can't really just read design about design." So interactiondesign.org is definitely a good one. You have a lot of amazing writers on Medium. There is a blog called The Hip Relevant. Some really amazing stuff there. Other than that, I read on and off a lot of articles, individual articles by a lot of people. In general, I'll read anything I can get my hand. I have read quite a few books specifically on conversation UX, but there is one really great book by Kathy Pearl where she talks about conversation UX. That is one good book if you want to read about conversation UX. So that's a good one.
Amazing. So in our earlier conversation, you talked about how voice interface is very different than the digital interface. Those of us who probably might not know that, how would you differentiate the experience, and how do you think it also, like, how do you think the mindset should be different for that? So,
Okay. I guess I'll just give a very two examples. So discovery as a element is very different when you're talking about graphical user GUIs and voice interactions. You can see something at the screen and you can discover it. You can probably get an idea of what's going to happen next. But when you're talking about Voice, there is no way for you to discover something. How do you discover something on what can Alexa do? So how do you tell users something new has come? How do you actually inform them of something? How can you actually tell them that some, uh, what can you do next? What more can you do? What extra can you do? So
Right.
discovery is a huge challenge. Um, the second one I would say is also feedback. So feedback, how do you give feedback in voice? So if I click on a button, I can see the appearance of a button changing. I can see, the screen changing to a next screen. How do you give feedback every time on something you can't see? So how do you tell user, okay, this has happened or this hasn't happened? And I said two, I'm going to add one more, context. So how do you give context to the user? If I know that I have added four things in my cart already, I can see that on the screen.
Right.
But I'm talking about, and I can keep adding. So how do you actually maintain context in the conversation? Whether it is chat based or whether it is voice based. So some of the very, overview things, how these things are very different. So I guess it's more on the more relies more on the psychology. Conversational UX relies much more on the psychology than
Right.
the graphic user interface, and it has to, because you really have to actually now get into the mind of the users and figure out that, okay, how do you actually convey something like that to them?
So the way you mentioned that, it's more about, if you have to do voice interfaces, that means you have to become even better at the psychology. So maybe if you focus on the psychology first, that's when probably, any interface would make sense. Why, whether it's a GUI or, whether it's a voice interface.
Definitely. I think we should always go to the depth first. Why should it be like that is the first question.
Right.
How come later? I guess that should go for anything. Whether we are talking about AR or we are talking about VR or talking about voice for that matter.
So at Design Shift, you are helping your students prepare their portfolios and helping them do the projects. So what do you think, like, what is the outcome? Like, how do you want them to prepare their portfolio?
Okay, so this is what we do. We always tell them that when you're projecting something, give a logic, a reason behind it. So even if you're putting, 5 screens, what's the reason for a screen to look a certain way? What kind of information are you putting in? Why is that kind of information important there? So
Right.
how the projects are prepared is with process. So you cannot grow design. You cannot say, hey, I made this 5 screens. Probably you can, and a lot of people do that. How we try to differentiate is that you have to have a stance, you have to have an understanding, and you have to have logic for everything that you do. Doesn't matter how small it is. So if you're redesigning something, you need to have a logic. If you're making a new product, you have to have an understanding. Now, I know that some of the students actually are better placed at a visual design position than a UX position, and some students are actually better at the UX. But we still make sure that all of them go through this process, because even if somebody is going to do only UX, they would have to interact with the visual designers at certain point. And
Exactly.
even if somebody is doing only visual design, they would have to talk to the UX people. So it's not like, oh, I'm not going to talk to you and I'm not going to look at you. You would have to encounter each other. So accept it, know it, and then you can make a choice. So that's how we tell all our students. Some of them come back and say, hey, I just want to be a visual designer. We are not having those courses right now. We tell them that, see, this is what we provide. Why don't you actually understand what UX is and then make a choice whether you want to do it or not? Or whether you want to do only UX, you can do great UX, but you still have to talk to visual designers. What would you do with that UX? So why don't you do the full thing? And you make a choice later. So I don't know if it's the right way to go, but in the time we have, that's the what we have only one course, but we make sure that each of them respect the other field. Like whether the UI designers understand UX and the UX and the UI.
So how much is the duration of the course? It's a weekend course, right?
It's a 3 months weekend course.
Wow.
Every Saturday and every Sunday there is class. Um, so I think all in all, if you will say 24, we will have somewhere close to 90 plus or probably 100 hours of course.
Wow. That's great. And do you have something, do you have an online platform as well?
Well, we don't have a product per se right now. We do have courses. Our courses are blended, so you can join the same course offline or same course online also. We have had students from across the world. We, as we discussed like them also, we had students from Turkey, Australia, all over India also.
Right. Amazing. So it's almost the end of the year and almost a year since you wrote that post on Facebook, which almost got viral. So what are your plans for next year? Like, what do you want to achieve with Design Shift in 2019?
Well, it's a good question that you asked. We have been thinking about this. So we really did not do this on a, do we say, more aggressive way. We are ourselves, in retrospect, understanding, okay, what did we do, where are we. I guess we are definitely considering adding a few more courses. Maybe have separate courses for UI. Actually, we are planning to do some workshops for designing for IoT. So these has designed a couple of products in the IoT field. I'm hoping to do some sort of workshop of talking about conversational UX itself. So whatever we have as knowledge, we want to see in what way can we deliver it. So maybe not just the courses. Now we can probably think about doing some workshops. We can try thinking about some design thinking workshops, or maybe some tech also. So we are looking at an angle where if we have figure out a right way of delivery of education in one field, that can very easily extend to another field too. So maybe we are at least the field which is very close to the design field itself, maybe front end development, maybe mobile development. So we are looking at those things, and fingers crossed, hopefully we will be able to take it to that level. And let's see, I guess January we are hoping to bring a few of these things come.
Awesome. So let's say somebody would be interested in joining you at Design Shift. So what should they do? Like, how should they reach out to you if they want to take admission in one of your courses?
Well, you can go to our website. You can register there. You can see one of our Instagram posts. There is a number for one of our person there. Or I'm sure now you can drop a message to Jagrati also. That will also put you in touch.
Amazing. So, Preeti, it was lovely talking to you. It's always so great to listen to people who are trying to make a difference and they are doing it without any expectation. You've actually, like, this is something that I was talking to Sudhir as well. You've actually traded your weekends to do this out of sheer love for design and something that you decided to change instead of cribbing about it. So, thank you so much for doing it for the community. It's a better place because of people like you and Sudhir. So thank you so much for joining us today. Love talking to you.
Thank you, Jagrati.
Thank you so much for watching. I hope you liked this episode. We are extremely curious to know what is your biggest takeaway. Leave a comment below and let us know. This is a weekly show, so make sure you subscribe. If you liked it, please share it with your friends and teammates. Keep learning, keep growing, and I will see you next time.